Captain Ji-ho Kim of the Earth Defense Fleet stared at the alien transmission on his view screen. His hands gripped the arms of his command chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The message was simple and direct. It told Earth to surrender within 30 days or face destruction. "Play it again," Ji-ho ordered, his voice steady despite the fear he felt inside. Lieutenant Han-bin nodded and activated the transmission once more. The alien face appeared on the main screen. It had gray skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. When it spoke, its mouth moved in a strange way that did not match the translated words. "People of Earth, I am Admiral Kyung-ho of the Arxian Empire. We have claimed this sector of space as our territory. Your planet now belongs to us. Surrender within 30 solar cycles and accept your place as a subject world. If you resist, we will destroy your civilization. You have 30 cycles to decide." The bridge of the defense ship Dauntless fell silent. Earth had discovered faster-than-light travel only 15 years ago. In that time, humans had built small colonies on Mars, Europa, and one planet in the Alpha Centauri system. They had met a few alien species, mostly traders and explorers. But the Arxian Empire was something different, something dangerous. "What do we know about them?" Ji-ho asked. Han-bin pulled up information on his screen. The Arxians have conquered 17 star systems. Their technology is centuries beyond ours. Their military power is enormous. Ji-ho nodded gravely. He had feared as much. "How many ships do they have?" "Our long-range scanners detect at least 300 warships approaching the Sol system. They will reach Earth in 28 days. "And our fleet?" Han-bin looked down at his console. 63 ships total, Captain. Most of them are not designed for combat." The bridge fell silent again. The numbers told a clear story. Earth could not win a direct battle against such a powerful enemy. "They outnumber us 5-1, said Han-bin quietly. "Their technology is far more advanced than ours." Ji-ho stood up from his chair. "Contact Admiral Taewon immediately. Tell him we need to activate Project Singularity." Han-bin's eyes widened. "Sir, that project is still experimental. The test pilots have reported severe side effects. We no longer have the luxury of caution, Lieutenant. Send the message." As Han-bin hurried to carry out the order, Ji-ho walked to the window of his ship. The Earth hung in space before him, blue and beautiful. His home. The home of 7 billion people who had no idea that an alien empire had just demanded their surrender. 24 hours later, Ji-ho stood in a large underground room beneath the city of Seoul. The Earth Defense Council had gathered in their emergency bunker. Military leaders and government officials sat around a circular table, their faces grim. Admiral Taewon, the head of Earth's defense forces, looked older than his 60 years. "The Arxian Empire has conquered every world they have encountered. They take what they want and force the local population to serve them. Can we negotiate?" asked one of the government officials. "Perhaps offer them resources in exchange for our independence?" Taewon shook his head. "The Arxians do not negotiate. They demand complete submission." "Then we fight," said General Soo-hyun, her voice firm. "Humans do not surrender." "If we fight conventionally, we will lose," Taewon replied. "Their ships are faster, their weapons are stronger, and they have centuries of experience in space warfare. So what do you suggest?" asked the President of the United Earth Government. Taewon looked at Ji-ho, then nodded for him to speak. Ji-ho stepped forward. "We have a technology that the Arxians do not know about, something they cannot predict or counter. Project Singularity." The room fell silent. Most people present had heard rumors about the top-secret project, but few knew the details. "Explain," ordered the President. Ji-ho touched a control, and a holographic display appeared above the table. It showed a human brain connected to complex machinery. 20 years ago, Dr. Soo-min Park discovered something unusual about human brains. Our neural patterns can form a direct connection with artificial intelligence systems. This connection is deeper than any normal interface. It allows a human mind to merge with a machine. As if on cue, Dr. Sumin Park entered the room. She was a small woman in her 50s with short gray hair and intense eyes. She had been the leading scientist on Project Singularity since its beginning. "The Nexus Protocol," Sumin said, walking to the center of the room. "It lets a human pilot connect directly with a ship's systems. The pilot does not just control the ship, they become the ship. Human intuition combined with machine speed and precision." "Is this even possible?" asked a skeptical council member. Sumin nodded. "We have 50 test pilots who have successfully linked with our newest ships. The results are remarkable. Reaction times 10 times faster than normal, perfect integration of all ship systems, tactical decisions that no AI can predict." "And the side effects?" asked the president. Sumin hesitated. "The neural load is intense. Pilots can only maintain the connection for a few hours before they need to rest. There are also psychological challenges. The experience of extending your consciousness into a machine is not easy to adjust to." "But it works," Jiho added. "I was one of the test pilots. The Nexus Protocol gives us an advantage that the Arxians cannot match." Admiral Taewan stood up. "We propose to equip our best ships with the Nexus Protocol system, 50 vessels with linked pilots. It may not be enough to defeat the Arxian fleet, but it could allow us to inflict enough damage to force them to reconsider." The council chamber erupted in debate. Some members argued that using such experimental technology was too risky. Others said they had no choice. The discussion lasted for hours. In the end, the president made the decision. Proceed with Project E. Singularity. If the Arxians will not allow us to exist as a free world, then we must use every tool at our disposal. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Earth's best ships were modified to work with the Nexus Protocol. Pilots trained day and night to improve their neural linking skills. Factories worked at maximum capacity to produce weapons and shields. At the neural linking facility, Dr. Sumin supervised the preparation of the pilot chambers. Each pilot would be placed in a special pod filled with supportive gel. Neural connections would link their brains directly to their assigned ships. "Are you ready for this?" Sumin asked Jiho as he prepared for a training session. Jiho nodded. "I don't think anyone is truly ready to merge their mind with a machine. But we have no choice. The Arxians will arrive in 4 days. Sumin placed a hand on his shoulder. "The Arxians believe they understand all the rules of warfare. They don't realize that humans excel at changing the rules entirely." As Jiho settled into his pod and felt the neural connections activate, he hoped she was right. The fate of Earth depended on it. The Arxians entered the Sol system right on schedule, their massive warships moving in perfect formation. They expected an easy victory or immediate surrender. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The Arxian invasion fleet entered the Sol system with overwhelming force. 500 warships against humanity's small defensive fleet of 60 vessels. The massive alien ships moved in perfect formation, their dark hulls absorbing the light from the distant sun. Admiral Kyung-ho stood on the command deck of his flagship. His gray skin and 4 eyes were common features of Arxian biology. The admiral had led 37 successful conquests in his career. Earth would be number 38. "Report on the human defenses," he ordered. His second-in-command, Captain Munsu, displayed the tactical screen. "Their ships are primitive, Admiral. Most use basic reaction thrusters and their weapons are limited to laser technology and nuclear missiles." Kyung-ho made a sound that in Arxian culture signaled amusement. "These creatures barely understand gravitational manipulation. This conquest will be remembered as little more than a footnote in our glorious history." What the Arxians didn't know was that for centuries, humans had been uniquely disadvantaged in the universe. While other species evolved with natural abilities, the Arxians with their photographic memories and enhanced strength, humans had nothing but their minds and ability to adapt. This disadvantage had forced humans to think differently, to try technologies other species considered impossible or not worth exploring. Back on Earth, Dr. Sumin Park walked through the underground research facility beneath Seoul. 50 specialized pilot chambers lined the walls. Each chamber held a single pilot in a gel-filled pod. Thin cables connected to the pilots' heads and spines. "Are they ready?" asked Admiral Taiwan, who had arrived to witness humanity's last hope. Sumin nodded. "The Nexus protocol is fully operational. All 50 pilots have successfully linked with their ships." 20 years earlier, Sumin had made an accidental discovery while working on quantum computing. Human brains had a unique quantum property, one that allowed them to create a direct neural connection with artificial intelligence systems. This connection, called the Nexus protocol, created a special relationship between human and machine that no other species could achieve. When connected, the human mind and the ship's computer became a single entity, capable of processing information and reacting at incredible speeds. Sumin stopped at one of the chambers and looked at the young pilot inside. Jun-ho had been one of her first volunteers. His eyes were closed, but rapid eye movement showed his mind was very active. "What is he experiencing right now?" Taiwan asked. "He isn't just controlling his ship," Sumin explained. "He is the ship. His consciousness extends through every system. He feels the engines as if they are his muscles. The sensors become his eyes and ears, extended far beyond human limits. In space, the human defense fleet waited at their positions. From the outside, the ships looked ordinary. But inside, each vessel had been modified with the special Nexus technology. Captain Ji-ho, Kim sat in his command chair on the flagship Dauntless. Unlike the other ships with single pilots, the Dauntless required 3 linked pilots to operate its more complex systems. "The Arxian fleet has passed the orbit of Mars," reported Lieutenant Hanbin. "They will reach our defensive line in 15 minutes. Ji-ho nodded. "Begin final preparations. Activate the Nexus protocol on my command." Ji-ho had been one of the first to test the Nexus protocol. He remembered the strange feeling of his mind expanding, merging with the ship's artificial intelligence. It had been overwhelming at first, suddenly being aware of thousands of systems at once, feeling the cold of space against the hull as if it were his own skin. With practice, the experience became natural. Human intuition combined with machine precision created something that was more than the sum of its parts. "Arxian fleet is launching fighter crafts," Hanbin announced. "They're sending the first wave." Ji-ho took a deep breath. "All ships, activate Nexus protocol." Throughout the human fleet, pilots in their chambers closed their eyes as the neural connection activated. Their consciousness expanded into their vessels, transforming them from mere operators to something new, hybrid entities that thought and reacted with both human creativity and machine speed. Ji-ho felt the familiar sensation of his mind linking with the Dauntless. His awareness stretched, encompassing the entire ship. He could feel the other 2 linked pilots as well, their thoughts becoming part of a shared consciousness that controlled the massive vessel. "All ships report Nexus protocol. Active," said Hanbin, his voice sounding distant to Ji-ho's expanded senses. The Arxian fighters approached with confidence. Their attack patterns were calculated by battle computers that had been perfected over centuries of warfare. These computers could predict enemy movements with 99.8% accuracy. But the human ships moved in ways the Arxian computers could not predict. They reacted not at the speed of computer processing, but at the speed of thought. Human thought enhanced through the Nexus protocol. In the lead human fighter, pilot Minji felt rather than saw the incoming attack. Her ship dodged energy blasts that would have destroyed a conventional vessel. She didn't need to press buttons or give verbal commands. Her thoughts directed the ship instantly, while the AI component calculated precise power distributions and weapon trajectories. On his flagship, Admiral Kyung-ho watched in confusion as his fighter squadrons failed to score direct hits on the human vessels. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Why can't our targeting systems lock onto them?" "Unknown, Admiral," responded Captain Munsu. "Their ships are moving in unpredictable patterns. Our algorithms cannot anticipate their maneuvers." "Impossible," Kyung-ho shouted as 3 of his support ships were disabled by a squadron of human fighters that seemed to anticipate every countermeasure. "Their reaction speeds exceed our targeting systems." In the research facility, Dr. Sumin monitored the neural readings from the command center. The display showed the brain activity of each pilot, their consciousness flowing through the ship's systems. The symbiosis is holding, she told Admiral Taewon. Our pilots are rewriting combat tactics as we speak. Taewon watched the tactical display with amazement. The human fleet was vastly outnumbered, but their ships moved with impossible grace and coordination. Can the Arxians adapt to this? Eventually, perhaps, Suman admitted. But their rigid command structure works against them. They rely on hierarchy and strict protocols. Each decision must travel up and down their chain of command. She pointed to the neural activity displays. Our linked pilots make decisions instantly. A single human pilot can process battlefield changes faster than an entire Arxian command staff. As the battle continued, the Arxians still held the advantage in numbers and firepower. But their rigid thinking and centralized command couldn't adapt quickly enough to this new form of warfare. By the battle's end, the Arxian invasion force had suffered heavy losses. Over half their ships were destroyed or disabled. For the first time in known history, Admiral Kyung-ho gave the order to retreat. As the remaining Arxian ships fled the Sol system, Captain Ji-ho and the human fleet did not pursue. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The true fight in humanity's place in the galaxy was just beginning. 1 week after their first defeat, the Arxians returned. This time, they came with their full might. 1,000 warships entered the solar system, their engines burning bright against the darkness of space. Admiral Kyung-ho had spent the past 7 days studying the battle recordings. He had lost face among the Arxian high command. No admiral had ever retreated from a lesser species before. He would not make the same mistake twice. We have adjusted our battle algorithms, Captain Munsu reported. Our computers have analyzed all possible movement patterns of the human ships. Kyung-ho nodded. And what about their strange reaction speeds? We believe they must be using some form of predictive AI. We have prepared countermeasures. On Earth, the situation was tense. The Arxians had returned with a force twice as large as before. The human fleet had barely survived the first encounter. Now they faced an enemy that had studied their tactics. Captain Ji-ho stood in the command center, looking at the holographic display of the solar system. The enemy fleet was passing the orbit of Jupiter, moving steadily toward Earth. How many ships can we field? Ji-ho asked. Admiral Taewon's face was grim. 85 vessels, including 20 new ships with the Nexus protocol installed. We've recruited more pilots, but many are only partially trained. Dr. Sumin entered the room, her eyes showing signs of exhaustion. She had been working without rest to improve the neural interface. We've made some upgrades to the Nexus protocol, she said. The pilots can now share sensory data between ships. They'll function not just as individuals, but as a coordinated network. Ji-ho looked concerned. Is it safe? Sumin hesitated before answering. The neural load is higher, but our pilots understand the risks. In the neural chamber facility, 50 experienced pilots and 35 new recruits floated in their gel-filled pods. Among them was Minji, who had destroyed 5 Arxian fighters in the first battle. Next to her was Jun-ho, who had been her flight instructor before the war. They could not speak with their physical bodies, but once the Nexus protocol activated, their minds would connect through their ships. Back in the command center, the tracking system showed the Arxian fleet splitting into 3 groups. They're changing tactics, said Admiral Taewon. The main fleet is approaching from the front, but they're sending forces to flank us from above and below the ecliptic plane. Ji-ho studied the display. They learned from last time. They're trying to overwhelm our ability to process multiple threats. Our ships need to launch now, Sumin urged. The pilots need time to adjust to the enhanced Nexus protocol. Admiral Taewon gave the order. Throughout Earth's orbital platforms, human ships detached from their docks. The 85 vessels formed a defensive sphere around the planet. In the center was the flagship Dauntless, with Ji-ho and 2 other veteran pilots linked to its systems. As the human fleet moved into position, the neural technicians activated the enhanced Nexus protocol. In their chambers, the pilots felt the familiar expansion of consciousness as they merged with their ships. But this time, there was something new. Each pilot could sense the others, their awareness forming a complex web of shared information. Minji felt Junho's presence nearby, along with dozens of other pilots. It wasn't like hearing voices or seeing images. It was a deeper understanding, an awareness of each other's intentions and movements. On the Dauntless, Jiho's expanded consciousness encompassed not just his own ship, but echoes of the entire fleet. He could feel them all, a network of human minds and machine intelligence. Arxian fleet will enter weapons range in 3 minutes, reported Lieutenant Hanbin, his voice seeming distant to Jiho's enhanced senses. Through the neural network, Jiho shared his battle plan. There were no verbal orders, no transmitted messages that could be intercepted. Just pure thought, flowing from mind to mind across the fleet. The Arxians launched their first assault with mathematical precision. Their battle algorithms had been perfected through countless conflicts. The center group fired a coordinated barrage of energy weapons, while the flanking groups launched fighter squadrons. In a conventional battle, this 3-pronged attack would have overwhelmed human defenses. But through the enhanced Nexus protocol, every pilot was aware of all threats simultaneously. The human ships moved in perfect coordination. When one section of the defense was under heavy attack, ships from other areas would shift to support, without needing orders. On his flagship, Admiral Kyung-ho watched in growing rage as his carefully planned assault failed to break the human formation. "Our targeting computers cannot lock onto them," shouted Captain Moon-soo. "It's like they know where we will fire before we do." "Impossible," Kyung-ho slammed his fist on the command console. "No species has reaction times that fast. There must be an explanation." In her neural chamber, Minji guided her fighter through a swarm of Arxian vessels. She didn't need to look at screens or readouts. She could feel the enemy ships around her, sense their energy signatures like heat on her skin. Through the neural network, she coordinated with 4 other pilots. They moved their ships in a dance that no computer could predict because it flowed from human intuition enhanced by machine precision. The 5 human fighters tore through the Arxian squadron, their weapons finding weak points in the alien shields. 7 enemy ships erupted in flames before the others could regroup. Throughout the battle, similar scenes played out. The human fleet was still outnumbered, but they fought with an awareness and coordination that the Arxians couldn't match. Dr. Sumin monitored the neural readings from the command center. Some of the newer pilots were showing signs of strain from the enhanced protocol, but they were holding. "It's working," she told Admiral Taewon. "The neural network is stable. Our pilots are rewriting tactical combat as we speak." 3 hours into the battle, the Arxian formations began to break down. Their rigid command structure couldn't adapt fast enough to the fluid tactics of the human fleet. When the Arxians would develop a counter to one tactic, the humans would instantly shift to another. On the Dauntless, Jiho directed the final push. Through the neural network, he coordinated a complex attack pattern. 20 fighters slipped past the Arxian defenses and struck at the engines of 3 dreadnoughts, disabling them. Admiral Kyung-ho watched in disbelief as his fleet was systematically taken apart by a force 1/10 its size. "We've lost 30% of our ships," reported Captain Moon-soo, his voice shaking. "Another 20% are heavily damaged." For the second time in his career, and the second time in Arxian military history, Kyung-ho gave the order to retreat. This decision would mark the end of his command, perhaps even his life when he returned to the Arxian homeworld. As the Arxian fleet withdrew from the solar system, the human pilots began to disconnect from the Nexus protocol. The enhanced neural connection had pushed them to their limits. Many would need days to recover fully. In the command center, Admiral Taewon received the reports of their victory. The human fleet had lost 12 ships, and another 17 were damaged, but Earth was safe. Dr. Sumin's expression was a mixture of relief and concern. "We won today, but the Arxians will be back, and next time they'll bring an even larger force." Jiho, his mind still adjusting to being confined to his body again, nodded in agreement. This was just a battle. The war is far from over. What none of them realized was that news of humanity's second victory was already spreading through the galaxy. Species that had lived under Arxian domination for generations watched with growing hope. Something unprecedented was happening in the Sol system, and the balance of power in the galaxy was beginning to shift. News of humanity's second victory against the Arxian Empire spread quickly through the galaxy. For the first time in 300 years, the most powerful military force in known space had been defeated, not once, but twice. On the planet Lyra, a world that had been under Arxian control for 6 generations, people gathered in secret to share the news. The Lyrans were a peaceful species with blue skin and 4 arms. They had once been great scientists before the Arxians conquered them. "Is it true?" asked Elthara, a Lyran scientist who had been forced to work on Arxian weapons. "Has someone finally defeated them?" Her friend Juriel nodded. "The communications networks are filled with the story. A species called humans from a planet named Earth. They have some technology the Arxians cannot counter." Hope, long forgotten on Lyra, began to stir again. Similar conversations happened on 17 other worlds under Arxian rule. Species that had known only submission for generations suddenly saw a possibility of freedom. In the grand meeting hall of the Galactic Council, representatives from 200 species gathered for an emergency session. The massive circular chamber had seats arranged by status, with the Arxian delegation occupying the most prominent position. The Arxian High Chancellor, a tall figure with gray skin and ceremonial armor, looked down at the assembly with cold eyes. Defeat was not something Arxians acknowledged publicly, but rumors had already reached most council members. "This council has been called to discuss the situation in Sector 7, specifically regarding the unregistered species from the planet designated Earth," announced the council speaker. Ambassador Do Hyun represented Earth at the council. It was the first time a human had been invited to speak before the assembled representatives. Beside him stood Dr. Sumin and Captain Ji-ho, both still recovering from the recent battle. The 3 humans looked small compared to many of the alien species. But as they walked to the speaker's platform, the hall fell silent. Every representative wanted to see the beings who had done the impossible. "The Arxian Empire attempted to conquer our world," Do Hyun began. His voice was calm and measured. "We defended ourselves using the resources available to us. We seek no conflict, only peaceful relations with all species." The Arxian High Chancellor rose from his seat. His voice boomed through the chamber. "You have deployed a weapon that violates the natural order. Our scientists have analyzed the battle recordings. You have created an abomination that merges organic minds with machines. This gives your species an unfair advantage and threatens all civilized worlds." Do Hyun smiled. It was a diplomatic smile that hid his true feelings. "What you call an abomination, we call cooperation. The Nexus Protocol is not a weapon. It is a partnership between 2 forms of intelligence, something your hierarchical culture simply cannot comprehend." Murmurs spread through the assembly. Many species had developed artificial intelligence, but none had achieved the kind of symbiosis the humans described. "You must surrender this technology, immediately," demanded the Arxian Chancellor. "It poses a threat to the established order of the galaxy." Captain Ji-ho stepped forward. The neural link with his ship had left him with a lingering headache, but his voice was steady. "The established order you speak of is one of domination. Your empire has conquered peaceful worlds and forced them to serve you. We will not surrender the technology that protects our freedom." The chamber erupted in voices. Some representatives shouted support for the Arxians, while others defended the humans. Species that had remained neutral for centuries were suddenly taking sides. "The Council," Speaker called for order. "The discovery of this neural technology raises important questions about the future balance of power. We will form a committee to study its implications." After the formal session ended, representatives from various worlds approached the human delegation privately. Most were curious, some were afraid, and a few saw an opportunity. The representative from Lyra, a slender blue-skinned female named Elthara, waited until the others had left before approaching. "Would you be willing to share this technology with others who wish to be free?" Do Hyun exchanged glances with Dr. Sumin. This was a delicate question. Sharing the Nexus protocol could help liberate oppressed worlds, but it could also lead to new conflicts. The technology is not simple to implement, Suman explained. It requires specific neural traits that we have only confirmed in humans so far. We would need to study Lyran brain patterns to see if compatibility is possible. Elthera's eyes brightened. Before the conquest, Lyrans were leading researchers in neural science. Perhaps together we could adapt your discovery. On the other side of the council chamber, the Arxian High Chancellor met with his military advisors. Admiral Vortek, who had replaced the disgraced Kyung-ho, reviewed the battle data again. The human technology gives them an advantage in combat, but they are still few in number, Vortek said. With enough ships, we can overwhelm them. The Chancellor narrowed his 4 eyes. The problem is no longer just military. Other species are watching. If we fail a 3rd time, rebellions could spread throughout our territories. Then we must strike quickly and with overwhelming force, Vortek insisted. Crush the humans before their influence grows. But it was already too late. As the human delegation returned to their temporary quarters, they received messages from 27 different species seeking private meetings. Some offered resources or alliance, while others wanted to learn more about the neural technology. In their quarters, Captain Ji-ho sat with Dr. Su-min, reviewing the messages. This has become much bigger than defending Earth, he said. We've started something that could change the entire galaxy. Su-min nodded. The Nexus protocol was created to save humanity, but perhaps its purpose is greater than we imagined. Ambassador Do-hyun joined them, carrying news from Earth. The Defense Council has made a decision. We will share our technology with compatible species, starting with the Lyrans. Their neural structure shows promising similarities to humans. Ji-ho looked concerned. If we share this technology, the Arxians will see it as an act of war against their empire. They already see us as enemies, Do-hyun replied. But now we have potential allies. For the first time, there is a real chance to challenge Arxian dominance. Over the next several weeks, scientists from Earth and Lyra worked together in secret. They discovered that with modifications, the Nexus protocol could indeed work with Lyran neural patterns. The first successful test came when Elthera herself linked with a small scout ship. Her consciousness expanded into the vessel's systems, just as the human pilots had experienced. It's remarkable, she said after disconnecting. I could feel everything. The ship became an extension of myself. Word of this success reached other worlds. On planets long dominated by the Arxians, resistance movements began to form. They looked to Earth not just for technology, but for hope that the balance of power could change. The Arxian Empire, sensing the growing threat, began to mobilize its full military might. 3,000 warships gathered at their home system, preparing for what would be called the final pacification of Sol. But the humans were not idle. Earth's factories worked day and night, building more ships equipped with the Nexus protocol. And now they were not alone. Vessels from Lyra and 3 other worlds joined the growing fleet of resistance. A storm was gathering across the galaxy. The next battle would determine not just the fate of humanity, but the future of 100 oppressed worlds. 5 years after the Battle of Sol, the galaxy had transformed. The massive Arxian final attack that everyone expected never came. Instead, something unprecedented happened. The news that Lyrans could also use the Nexus protocol spread like wildfire through the Empire. 3 more species discovered they were compatible. System by system, the Arxian hold began to weaken. Admiral Ji-ho, promoted after the second victory, stood on the observation deck of Earth's first diplomatic station. The large space structure orbited at the edge of what had once been Arxian space. Ships from dozens of worlds passed through the busy transit hub. 5 years ago, we thought we were alone, Ji-ho said, watching the traffic. Now look at us. Beside him stood Dr. Su-min and the Lyran scientist Elthera. The two had become close friends and research partners. Together, they had improved the Nexus protocol and adapted it for compatible species. We never set out to create a weapon, said Su-min, her eyes following a large transport ship with markings from a world that had been freed just months ago. We were just trying to survive. The greatest inventions often come from necessity, replied Elthara, her blue skin contrasting with her white scientist uniform. What makes humans special is not the technology itself, but your willingness to share it, to use it for freedom rather than control. The diplomatic station, named Unity, was the physical symbol of the new coalition of free worlds. 27 planets had joined so far, with more applying each month. At the heart of the coalition was a simple principle: cooperation between organic and digital minds created strength that neither could achieve alone. The Arxian Empire still existed, but it had shrunk to less than half its former size. After failing to develop their own version of the Nexus Protocol, they had tried one massive military assault against the growing coalition. It had been a disaster for them. Ships linked with pilots from 5 different species had crushed their attack force. The latest report from our intelligence network, said Jiho, activating a small display. The Arxian Military Council is divided. Half want to negotiate peace terms with the coalition. The other half want to continue fighting. Sumin looked concerned. And the High Chancellor? He was removed from power 3 days ago. His replacement is more moderate, open to talks. A young aide approached and bowed respectfully. Admiral, Ambassador Do Yun has arrived with the representatives from the new systems. Jiho nodded. Today was an important day. 3 more worlds were joining the coalition. One of them was a former Arxian colony that had overthrown its governors. After learning about the Nexus Protocol, in the main conference room, Ambassador Do Hyun welcomed the new representatives. 5 years of diplomatic work had changed him. His hair now had streaks of gray, but his eyes showed the satisfaction of a man who had helped build something important. The coalition welcomes Teller, Vosh, and New Arxia as full members, Do Hyun announced to the applause of the gathered diplomats. The representative from New Arxia stepped forward. He was Arxian by species, but his people had rejected the Empire's ways. We are honored to join. My people have much to learn about cooperation and partnership. This was perhaps the most surprising development of all. Some Arxians themselves had begun to question their Empire's philosophy of dominance and control. Young Arxians especially were interested in the new approach that humans had introduced to the galaxy. After the ceremony, Jiho and Sumin walked through the station's garden section. Plants from a dozen worlds grew together in a carefully designed ecosystem. It was a small example of how different species could thrive together. Do you remember what Admiral Taewan said when we first tested the Nexus Protocol? Sumin asked. He was worried it would make humans too powerful, that we might become like the Arxians. Jiho smiled. And you told him that the very nature of the technology made that impossible. True neural linking requires trust and cooperation. It cannot work with a mindset of dominance. The Arxians still don't understand, Sumin said. Their scientists keep trying to replicate the technology without grasping that it's not about the neural interfaces or the quantum algorithms. It's about trust, the willingness to share control, to form true partnerships between organic and digital minds. They stopped at a viewing window that looked out at the stars. A coalition patrol ship passed by, its design showing elements of both human and Lyran engineering. Their culture is based on hierarchy and control, Jiho said. The idea of sharing consciousness, of blending minds with a machine intelligence as equals, is foreign to them. That's why their empire is failing while the coalition grows. On the other side of the station, Elthara met with a group of scientists from various worlds. They gathered around a new prototype ship, smaller than a fighter but with advanced systems. The Mark 7 neural interface requires only 1 hour of training, Elthara explained. Almost anyone with compatible neural patterns can learn to use it. A young human scientist raised her hand. But isn't there a risk in making the technology so accessible? What if someone uses it for the wrong purposes? Elthara smiled. That's the beautiful safeguard of the Nexus Protocol. The neural link simply won't form if the intent is domination or control. The connection requires a mindset of partnership. This was the final secret that had eluded the Arxian scientists. The quantum nature of the neural connection responded to the user's intentions and emotions. It was a technology that could only be used by those willing to share rather than dominate. Back in the diplomatic section, Jiho received a message that representatives from 3 more systems wished to join the coalition of free worlds. One was a species that had been neutral for centuries. The other 2 were former Arxian strongholds that had declared independence. The coalition continues to grow, he told Sumin when she joined him. Not through conquest, but because others see the benefits of our approach. Sumin nodded thoughtfully. Humanity's true secret weapon was never the Nexus Protocol. It was our ability to turn cooperation into strength, to see allies where others saw only tools or threats. As evening fell on the station, the observation deck filled with visitors from many worlds. They came to watch the stars and the ships passing by. Among them were humans, Lorans, and even a few Arxians who had chosen a different path than their empire. Jiho stood with Sumin and Elthara, watching the diverse crowd. When the Arxians first came to Earth, I thought it was the end of humanity, he said quietly. Instead, it was a beginning. Not just for humanity, Elthara added, her forearms gesturing to include the entire station. For all of us. A child from Vosh, a species that resembled small bears, approached Jiho with curious eyes. Is it true that humans were the first to share thoughts with ships? Jiho knelt down to be at eye level with the child. We were the first to discover the Nexus Protocol, yes, but the real discovery was that we are stronger together than apart. That's the lesson that changed the galaxy. As the 3 friends looked out at the stars, they knew the universe would never be the same again. Humanity had changed the game, not through superior firepower or numbers, but by introducing an entirely new way of thinking about the relationship between different kinds of minds. And the journey was just beginning.